On today's program, something very old and something new, Jaffa, one of the old harbors of Israel, and a discussion of technology in this remarkable land. Shalom, hello again. Well, on this program, another ignored side of Israel, the amazing ingenuity and technology of this place, the science, the medicine, the contributions to the modern world. I don't think you will find these contributions in any Arab country, but in Israel, just a generation old in its modern form, it has become a leader among the nations in technology. You know, on one tour, my suitcase got lost, and it was full of heart pills. I had to replace them right away. So there was a cardiologist in the tour group, and we went to a pharmacy. But it was quite easy to find Israeli equivalents. They were all Israeli pills to start with. They invent the medicines. We put long names on them and raised the price by 10 times, but many times the Israelis are the ones who thought of it in the first place. But first we'll go to Jaffa. Jaffa is an old port. Abraham could have visited here for all I know. It's here, just south of Tel Aviv, one of Israel's very large cities, on the Mediterranean coast. Here's Jerusalem. This yellow line is the West Bank, so-called. Jaffa has been out here on the sea and so old that Jonah sailed from there and people 1,000 years before him. From this port, Israel truly became a voice to the nations. Our location is the famous harbor of Jaffa. Now there are modern constructions here, of course, but it was from this harbor that Peter and Paul set sail, Jonah set sail. Israel reached out to the world. They had some idea of their calling to reach out to the nations. In the Declaration of Independence, composed here in Tel Aviv, they wrote, "In the land of Israel, the Jewish people came into being. In this land was shaped their spiritual, religious, and national character. Here they gave to the world the eternal book of books." And indeed, if Israel imported nothing else to the world but this wonderful Bible, the Old Testament and the New Testament, written and published here in Israel by Jewish people, that would have been enough. They are the home of all evangelists in the sense that either they set sail from here like the famous evangelists of old, or they go out of this Bible that was originally published here. Tourism, the people coming the other direction to Israel, is another way they bless the nations. 2.5 million people come here every year to visit less than 5 million Israelis. Imagine that. What a proportion. It's like nearly 150 million people visiting the United States in a year. And of the tourism, 60% is Christian tourism. Pastor groups, led by churches, groups like the ones we take, pilgrims, Bible people who want to see the place where it all happened. There's also a great deal of tourism otherwise. The Europeans come here for fun and sun. They don't really have a biblical consciousness, typically, these kind of secular groups that come down here for the beaches and so on. They favor the Palestinian Authority, especially the French, one of the most anti-Semitic nations I ever visited. When they come here, I'm reminded of my namesake, Emile Zola, who was an author who wrote a book about Alfred Dreyfus, the captain in the French army who was Jewish and was accused of spying. And Emile Zola covered that in his book called J'accuse, I accuse. He accused the French government of anti-Semitism. He was right then, and he'd be right today from my experiences in that country. But in any case, Europeans come here not with an appreciation of the land of the Bible so much, but just as a playland, as a place where their money goes pretty far, and the Mediterranean is here and so on. It's a land of such physical contrasts, you know. You can go skiing, and you can go to a desert in the same day, in the same hour if you want to. Like in California, you seem to have all lands, all latitudes, all climates in one small place. You know, there's a story of Palestinian farmers going to California in the 19th century to help the farmers there in California cultivate their vineyards and so on in a land very similar to this land. And that story is true. I looked into it, but those Palestinian farmers were all Jewish. The co-option of the term Palestinian by Arabs has caused people to think that all Palestinians are Arabs, but after, that is before 1948, everyone who lived in Palestine was a Palestinian, including the Jews. Well, Jaffa is an old city, some say even antediluvian. But in any case, Jonah set sail from here, definitely almost where I'm standing. The harbor was right here, and he fled the will of the Lord. He took out a ship to Tarshish, wherever that was. Some make it in Turkey, some make it all the way over in Spain. But anyway, it was a foreign nation. It wasn't where he was supposed to go. He was supposed to go to Nineveh and preach the gospel, if you know the story of Jonah the reluctant missionary. And today I'm afraid we have a nation of Jonahs, that is people who hear God and live with him all the time, but maybe don't always do his will. Israel should witness, however. Israel is a witnessing nation. They are the original evangelists. The Bible is purely Jewish. Peter and Paul sailed from here, as we said. In Isaiah 49, the prophet puts it beautifully when he says, "Thus saith the Lord, in an acceptable time have I heard thee, and in a day of salvation have I helped thee, and I will preserve thee and give thee for a covenant of the people, to establish the earth, to cause to inherit the desolate heritages, that thou mayest say to the prisoners, Go forth. To them that are in darkness, show yourselves. They shall feed in the ways, and their pastures shall be in all high places." This is in a chapter in my Scofield Bible headed Israel to be preserved and restored, and it certainly is. You know, the subject of reluctant prophets, Jonah wasn't the only one. When you look at the men God called, well, starting with Moses, who said he was slow of speech, and then Aaron spoke for him and so on. And Jeremiah had to prophesy, not that he was reluctant to prophesy, he had a lot of courage, and he prophesied the destruction of Jerusalem, and he named names by Nebuchadnezzar and the Chaldees, the families of the north, coming down on us, and he was jailed for his troubles. It was treason to speak against Jerusalem, and yet he was right. He lived to see the invasion from his jail cell. Isaiah must have been reluctant to have to write, "He is despised and rejected of men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief, and we hid, as it were, our faces from him. He was despised, and we esteemed him not." Surely the 53rd chapter of Isaiah is one of the most obvious prophecies of the first advent of the Messiah. "Surely he hath borne our griefs and carried our sorrows. Yet we did esteem him stricken, smitten of God, and afflicted. But he was wounded for our transgressions. He was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement of our peace was upon him, and with his stripes we are healed." It must have been hard, though, to be inspired by the angel to say that. Gideon, when he was called by the Lord to a military mission, put out the fleece. He just didn't believe the Lord really was calling him, and he was a little reluctant to go. In the end times, of course, God will call from this nation the 144,000. Revelation 7:4 says 12,000 of each of the 12 tribes of Israel. There's no contradicting that, and that can't be the church. And this harebrained idea that the church is Israel now, that doesn't work in a scripture like this. Revelation 14:6 and 7, the angel is saying, "Preach the gospel in all the earth," and surely they will do that. You know, David Ben-Gurion, the great first prime minister of Israel, said, "I dare believe in victory. We shall triumph." Even faced with 650,000 total people, I don't know how many armed men, very few, facing 5 Arab armies totally equipped, and said, "We shall triumph," and so they did. In Romans 11:25 and 27, the ultimate triumph of Israel is recorded, where Paul says, "For I would not, brethren, that ye should be ignorant of this mystery, lest ye should be wise in your own conceits, that blindness in part is happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles come in. And so all Israel shall be saved, as it is written, there shall come out of Zion the deliverer, and shall turn away ungodliness from Jacob. For this is my covenant unto them, when I shall take away their sins. So the ultimate destiny of Israel in the so-called second coming of the Lord, when he returns, will be a national salvation. They shall look upon me whom they've pierced, and mourn for him as for an only son, says the prophet Zechariah in 12:10, and a fount of cleansing will be opened unto the house of David. So ultimately, these people who sometimes were reluctant, sometimes believed and sometimes didn't believe, sometimes reached out to the nations and sometimes didn't, in the end, nationally, will all be redeemed.
Thus saith the Lord God, I shall gather you from the peoples, and assemble you out of the countries where you've been scattered, and I will give you the land of Israel. The wilderness and the dry land shall be glad. The desert shall rejoice and blossom as the rose. You shall know that I am the Lord, when I bring you into the land of Israel.
Well, I'm in a neighborhood of jewelry stores, art galleries, fine craftsmanship, this kind of thing, Eastern stones. But you wouldn't think that modern things like this would be found in some of these old buildings. This city is really old, and oldie but goodie. Well, there's a Hebrew legend that it was built originally by one of Noah's sons, Japheth, named Jaffa, and that 8 people, of course, got off the ark and had the whole world to settle in, and he settled here. That is kind of legendary. The Greek legend holds more truth, I think, because it agrees with history. Jaffa was the daughter of a Greek god and the god of the winds, and she, the thing was named here by Greek sailors who came from the Adriatic, or from Crete. They were the original Philistines. It bears mentioning because today's Palestinians say they are descended from the original Philistines. That's impossible. The Philistines were Europeans who came here in ships from the Mediterranean. The Palestinians are Arabs who came up here from the southern desert, so there's no connection there. But in any case, this place was here when Joshua came. He failed to conquer it. It was a tough stronghold. Later on, in David's time, he captured the city, and that was at about 1000 BC. And it was an important capture because the harbor here came into play with the building of the first temple of God by David's son, King Solomon. Solomon contacted his friend and ally, King Hiram of Tyre, when relations with Israel and what is now Lebanon were in much better shape. And he agreed to send down cedars from Lebanon to build the temple. They were floated down the Mediterranean and offloaded at this harbor. This was a major port. Now it's a major port for tourists and for shoppers and whatnot. Nowadays, oranges are shipped out of here along with many other products, but the oranges are stamped Jaffa. There's a supermarket in my neighborhood with Jaffa oranges, and there may be in yours. So nowadays we have modern artists, oranges, the modern world coming out of some of the oldest buildings to be found just anywhere. One of the important ways Israel is a voice to the nations is, of course, through the Bible, written there, Old Testament and New. It is the most influential book. I don't think we have to argue that point anywhere in the world. And then Israel sent the evangelists to the empire. This was, when Paul and Silas and Barnabas and so on went out to the Roman Empire, this just changed history. This really changed the Western world completely, and some of the Eastern world as well. They left from Jaffa, by the way, and it is now a productive contributor to the modern world. Israel is a power. Its economy is somebody said 10 times the size of Egypt, Jordan, and Syria put together. I believe that, and it's really an important nation now. Ken Berg, our producer, spoke with the Minister of Science about the many innovations going on in modern Israel.
Would you tell me about the responsibilities of the Minister of Science here in Israel?
The Ministry of Science is responsible for the space agency, is responsible for what we call in Israel Internet 2. We have the elementary research that is taking place in the universities, and the implementing researches that are taking place within the industry.
You mentioned space. That sounds very interesting. We never hear about that in America. What's happening in space in Israel?
Israel is a very tiny state, but it looks that we are very great, or we even maybe one of 7 or 8 countries in the world that have in the same time satellites and launcher that are made in Israel. The speciality in our programs here that we have very tiny satellites, that it's only 40 kilos, it's something like about 80 pounds, it's 40 centimeters, I don't know to translate to inches, and we want to take our knowledge in tiny satellites to be part of this world space station that now they are developing in NASA.
How do you account for the involvement in space and cyberspace, leading the world in so many areas of science, and yet it being such a small country?
We have very good brains here. We have very good people that got very good training. You have to know that Israel was in a situation of war for tens of years. And in those years, we had to develop our high-tech in very military fields that, of course, now helped very much to increase our high-tech in the civilian ones. We are doing everything to invest in education, to invest in universities, to invest in academic institutions, to invest in R&D. Unfortunately, most of the budget is still going to the defense issues and not what we would have wanted to invest on. But still, Israel, in its last 50 years of existence, did everything to invest in R&D, in high-tech. I think the people that are involved with high-tech know that Israel is a superpower in this area.
Far from the image of dusty streets and civil unrest, the nation of Israel is thriving, innovative, and prosperous. Our friend David Bar-Illan, former advisor to Prime Minister Netanyahu and executive editor of the Jerusalem Post, gives us his unique perspective on Israel's prosperity.
We are on a European level. Our economy is thriving. As a matter of fact, we've been very fortunate that in the fact that even though we don't have natural resources the way the Arab world has, you know the prevalent joke in Israel that that Moses managed to find the only place in the Middle East which doesn't have oil. The fact is that we do have this problem of natural resources, but today we have what is considered the most important natural resource in the world, and that is the kind of brain power which is an essential part of the economy of the next century. The kind of brain power which makes this the second Silicon Valley in the world. The kind of brain power which makes biotechnology, for instance, one of the most thriving forms of science in this country, and which is, after all, the science of the future, genetic research, that sort of thing. And as you said, the per capita income, the per capita GDP, the production of this country is on a very, very high level, and we hope that within the next decade or so we will actually supersede most of the European countries. Considering that we are constantly still under siege, that our defense budget is far larger than any European country allows itself to have, and that we have also a constant challenge of absorbing very large immigrations. Considering all that, I think that what we've performed here is nothing short of miraculous.
It is miraculous, it is. Why do the Europeans, well, for example, the Euro Parliament, whatever you want to call it, announced recently the absolute legislative right of the Palestinians to build a country here in Israel and so on. Why do they seem to take the other side?
This is something that I'm afraid for a real answer you'll have to address them, because I'm really puzzled by it, to be quite truthful about it. After all, it used to be considered an economic consideration. The Arab market is much larger than ours, and if they want to curry favor with it, they have to be anti-Israeli. But now our economy is so large and so prosperous that we actually, our GDP is larger than all our neighbors put together.
Your gross domestic product.
Gross domestic product. So it's very difficult to understand, except in terms of the fact that it is always easier to try to curry favor with dictatorships than with a democracy, because a democracy will forgive you. You know that you will continue having good terms with the democracy no matter what you say and what you do about it. While dictatorships can take revenge, can retaliate by doing the kind of things that you don't want them to do, by boycotting you, by boycotting companies that invest in Israel, for instance, which is what used to be the case and still is in many instances even today. So it's the kind of thing that is taking the path of least resistance, attacking the democratic friend and ally, and currying favor and acting sycophantically towards the dictatorships around it.
Well, in closing, I guess our subject, this is Israel, is to demonstrate this country as a leading nation and hardly a backward and troubled nation. Do you think that up ahead we're going to have peace, or at least tranquility?
I'm not sure, because for the time being, the maximum that Israel can give with security and safety and the minimum of what the Palestinians are demanding are still incompatible. The distance and the gap between them is so large that I'm not quite sure that it is possible to have the kind of peace that we talk about in the West, that is between France and Germany, for instance. We may be able to reach an arrangement which will be something other than war, which of course is better than war, yes, needless to say. Yeah. On the other hand, I don't think the development of the economy and of the standard of living in this country and its dynamism have anything to do with all this. I think that it will continue to thrive, continue to make progress, continue to develop, continue to be one of the leading countries in the world economically and socially, regardless of what happens on the peace level.
And another way that Israel is a voice to the nations is giving it a lesson on how to thrive in the Middle East. After all, there are 200 million Arabs in this kind of country and that. Some have oil, some have other resources, etc. Some have been in their countries 5,000 years working on the places. Israel has outstripped them all. And this is something the nation should pay attention to. I have said it from time immemorial with Jewish brains and Arab money, the Middle East could be paradise. If the Arab cultures would simply embrace these neighbors, they live with them, my gosh, for thousands of years in the past, and quit this chest-thumping indignation about this tiny country in the middle of them, and simply cooperate, it could be wonderful. But in any case, the Bible and Islam have nothing much to say to each other, and that's a fact. I think if the Lord tarries, Islam will begin to give out its hostility to not just Israel, but to the Christians of the world in very important ways. I've said often the 21st century is apt to be a century of war between Islam and democracy if the Lord tarries. Well, those who can't see that God is working in Israel just aren't paying attention. That's all I can say. This certainly includes Christian seminaries that have not been teaching about Israel, and pastors who I've spoken so many times in churches where it wasn't welcome to talk about Israel, or wasn't even understood why I wanted to talk about Israel. Can you imagine? I spoke at a church once where I offered the Passover service, and the pastor said, "This is a Christian church, my friend." It's not understanding. Of course, Jesus' Last Supper was Passover. Israel is eventually to become the head of the nations. In the tribulation, it says, Zechariah tells that 10 men will grab the coat of a Jew, saying, take us, you know where you're going, etc. And it's on its way. It really is. It's amazing what they have done in 52 years. There are countries all around the world, much older than that haven't accomplished what Israel has accomplished, even steadily at war with the Arabs, with the media, with the Christian seminaries, with people everywhere that for some reason come down on this place. Well, and I know the reason. We've discussed it before. If it's God's country, well, God has an enemy, and it's not his country, and he would like to eliminate that country. Read Jerusalem, the Truth. That's our offer tonight. David Bar-Illan was a guest on the program. He wrote a brilliant book earlier in the 90s that now serves as a kind of history of how we got here. Hard-hitting editorials from the Jerusalem Post about the peace process, particularly focusing around the city of Jerusalem. It's a wonderful book, a very good read. You will not put it down. I wanted to ask you for a word of prayer for David Bar-Illan. He recently had a very serious heart attack, and if all of us pray together, it'll help. Get our Levitt letter and our catalog at our address. There's no charge for those. Remember the gifts of funds, and as you pray for David Bar-Illan, Sha'alu Shalom Yerushalayim, pray for the peace of Jerusalem.